Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, my number one then is Killer is Dead on the Xbox 360, also available on the PlayStation 3. It's the new game from Suda 51. Have you played it yet?
No, but you've had it for a while, haven't you?
I have. I played it. I finished it like several weeks ago. I really, really like it. Basically, it's a Suda 51 greatest hits collection.
Right.
It's really derivative, and I have to say that because it really is. Some uncharitable people might say that Suda is starting to repeat himself, and you have to hold your hands up and say, yeah, he probably is. The combat is very, very easy to compare with the sword fighting in No More Heroes. I mean, Mondo Zappa's combat stance is exactly the same as Travis Touchdown, and just the pace of the combat is very similar. Visually, obviously, it looks like Killer 7. The gunplay and the upgrade structure are both straight out of Shadows of the Damned, and the humour is very puerile, but it's quite scarce. So it made me think of Lollipop Chainsaw.
Okay.
So it's a meshing of all of Suda's back catalogue almost. It's too derivative to be a classic, and it won't convince you. If you don't like his games, this is not going to convince you that he's some kind of genius. But I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm playing it through it again on hard mode now. And yeah, it's the funny thing about it is that at the same time as being his most accessible game, it's his least accessible game at the same time. It's perverse how they're two things that don't fit. So basically, the story is impenetrable and weird, and for the first 90 minutes of the game, maybe 2 hours, the gameplay to cutscene split is about 5-1. So there's a lot of cutscenes, and it's really tough. You can have a choice between English language, and you can have the original Japanese audio if you want. But it's a long haul, and if you're not prepared for that, it might put you off. On the other hand, the combat is really, really accessible. There's this parry move called Just Guard, and you can basically spam it. So if you're in a combat scenario with 5 people hammering, you just hammer parry all the time, and you parry them straight away. You're never tested on your skill of timing or your skill of rhythm. Never tested. It's not. It makes something. The Devil May Cry. It's not.
Yeah.
It's really fun, but even on very hard mode, I was expecting once I stepped up onto the different difficulties, the parry would involve very, very specific timing, but it doesn't. So it's his most accessible game because the combat is very straightforward. It never stops being fun, and it's appealing way beyond the length of the game, the length of the campaign, I should say.
How long is it?
I'd say the campaign's about 6 hours, 6-7 hours. No, probably 7-8 hours. I'd say roughly. But the most interesting, one of the most interesting things about the game is that most of the best stuff is on the sidelines. So there's all these challenge missions that unlock throughout the game, and they're really very, very clever, very, very smartly done, because not only do they in most games like this, challenge missions will be something from the level you just played, do it again, to either with a time limit or a score limit or something like that. What they do with these is they always mix it up. So if you've done, for example, in the campaign, there's this mission where you have to infiltrate this building. In the challenge mission, you have to get out of the building. In the campaign, there's quite a quiet bit in this bit of there's a specific bit of scenery, and then in the challenge mission, it's a really loud and rowdy gun turret set piece.
Okay.
So it's never the same thing twice. If you want to replay the missions, you can, obviously, but there's so much variety in the challenge missions that they represent the best part of the package, which is quite unexpected.
Right.
If you want to ignore all the challenge missions, you can, because the stuff that you can unlock, it's mainly to get more money. But the stuff you do unlock some things which can also be unlocked elsewhere in the campaign, so they're completely optional. Also optional are the Gigolo missions, which I assume you've heard about.
Well, this is the thing that caused all the consternation, wasn't it? I mean, at a glance, seemed to be... I don't know. My opinions on these sorts of things do tend to differ from everybody else's, but I just thought it looked funny and stupid because I know the man's work, right? And understand that he tends to err on the side of parody most of the time. And fucking stupidity as well. Really. Dumbassery, which not stupidity is the wrong word. Dumbassery, which is something that I like all the time. I just thought it looked funny, but then again, I don't think I've always found maybe I'm a lot less sensitive to this sort of stuff than a lot of people, or maybe I'm not.
Yeah, see, I'm in the same boat as you. It's impossible for me to talk about the Gigolo missions without talking about a video that videogamer.com put out called Killer is Dead, Just Like Suda51's Career. As far as I'm concerned, it's the worst thing to have appeared on a mainstream gaming site for a year, maybe longer than a year. There's this, I mean, you know about this. There's an utterly bizarre subsection of the games press in England who endlessly celebrate and congratulate each other for having knee-jerk reactions to things. And what they do when they have these reactions is they write articles or they make videos and they present them, they articulate them so that they sound like these things are things that they've sat down and actually thought about. So at the beginning of that video, Matt Lees explains that he hasn't played Killer is Dead. He has literally watched someone else play it and watched over their shoulder. Literally that. So he can't offer any context on the subject because he hasn't played it. And then 20 seconds later, he says to the camera, it's all about context. And that is bullshit artistry of the highest order. It's completely dishonest. This obsession with identity politics has really got to stop because it's stifling coverage and discussion of an art form that's in its infancy. And if you're not intrigued and excited by the places that an interactive art form can take you exclusively, I don't know why it's your job. I don't know why you're writing about it. Because everyone knows damn well if these mini games or if this characterization wasn't interactive and if it was in a cutscene, there would be no fuss. Just because there's 100 years of enlightened art criticism where we can accept that an artist can create unlikable people, and we don't have to pin any kind of accusations on them. I mean, the argument expressed in that video is Philistine. It's completely anti-art. It says that if you create unlikable people or if they perform unlikable acts, you can do that and they can exist, but the second you interact with them, apparently it's fair game to rob an artist of his creative relativity and dismiss him as a pervert. If you think that's right, honestly, it's despicable that, again, the games press, there's always talk about cliques and how it's an echo chamber and it's insular and it's impenetrable and it's all just this little backslappy sort of... Who cares? No one's interested. I don't give a shit about that most of the time. But when it's in a situation like this, I just, the fact that people I admire and respect liked and shared this video is a damning indictment of it, because I know some of them shared it without having watched it, without thinking what the implications were of sharing it. It's completely anti-art. Philistine. Anyway, if you liked or shared that video, go back and watch it again. Listen to what is being said, and if you genuinely think that that's worthwhile, or it's well argued, or it's progressive, I'm sorry, I think you're an intellectual degenerate. Anyway, the fucking Gigolo missions themselves are not worth a damn anyway. They're trial and error, and they're boring. And that's the other thing. You said you think that they're quite funny. I laughed at them repeatedly, and if you think that they're not done for laughs, I don't know what planet you're on. Here is what happens in all of these games. In every scenario when you play these Gigolo missions, the first thing you see is Mondo Zappa sitting at a bar, and he has a sip of his beer, puts the beer down, turns, notices there's a pretty girl sitting next to him, turns back to face you, one eyebrow goes up. I mean, really. And then basically you have to give these women gifts, and while they're not looking, you kind of gawp at them. And this meter goes up, and if you give them the right gifts to the right people, it goes up faster. It's boring. But anyway, yeah, sorry, the first thing that happens is the eyebrow. While you're oogling them, Zappa says things like, magnifico. And then if you manage to get them to take them to bed, he gives a thumbs up to the camera at the end. Here's two things that can happen when you take them to bed. In one instance, the screen fades to white and Zappa screams like a bloodied man on a battlefield. Oh, yeah! That's one thing that happened. Another thing that can happen is what I described as first-person lech mode. You're in the bedroom with this woman, and your first-person perspective, Zappa's hands are out in front of you like he's trying to grope her breasts. I mean, it's comedy. I don't care what you think about the outdated sexual politics, but it's comedy. But with regards to the outdated sexual politics, Goichi Suda has said repeatedly in different interviews that this is supposed to be the underbelly or the flip side or the dark side of James Bond. And you can't argue with him on that. Because the James Bond of old, not so much now obviously, but that's what James Bond did. He oogled women, occasionally gave them gifts, and then he fucked them. That's what he did. The thing that's actually quite interesting about this is it presents James Bond... Mondo Zappa is a really unlikable character. He's bookish, and he's one of the least likable protagonists of any game I've played, I think. But if there was a real life James Bond, he would be this drunk, incredibly pathetic. He completely unable to deal with these people, so he just showers them with gifts and then takes them to bed. I mean, he would be as pathetic as this guy is, and that's so important because at no point are you supposed to empathise with this character. And there's a great example in the campaign. During the campaign, this woman comes to ask, because they run a firm for executioner, what do you call it? Like a hitman firm. They're killers. Mm-hmm. This woman comes in and she's distraught and she's shaken up and she wants to have someone killed. Again, I don't know how sorry we should feel for her because she's coming to ask to have someone murdered for her. But when she's sitting there and she's shaken up, he sees this and he's like, oh, you know what? I'll do this job, but I don't want any money. I'll do it for a kiss. You know, not now. You don't have to give it to me now. We'll meet later. And he's a predatory scumbag. He's so unlikable. And the fact that you're not allowed to... Anyway, bollocks. The gigolo missions, after all, that aren't even worth the fuss. They're the least interesting part of the game, but you can skip them. The game's consistently good. The only thing I didn't like, rather, in the campaign is that at the end it kind of goes a bit meta, and there's break the fourth wall dialogue, and it's flippant and pointless, and it's just slightly irritating. And there's a plot sort of revelation in the third act that's really, really, you could see it coming a mile off. But it's a true flight of imagination, like all of Suda's games. It's the most random, amusing stuff happens. The combat is fun, like I said, way beyond you finish the campaign. There are several laugh out loud moments, but not too many. A terrific soundtrack. It's basically excellent. It's just a little too derivative and a tad too simplistic to be sort of, completely and utterly memorable or a must-buy. But if you're a fan of Suda, you can't miss it, but then you already knew that. I really, really enjoyed it. And if you think it's sexist, you're a dipshit. Classic, and it won't convince you. If you don't like his games, this is not going to convince you that he's some kind of genius. But I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm playing it through it again on hard mode now. And yeah, it's the funny thing about it is that at the same time as being his most like several weeks ago, I really, really like it. Basically, it's a Suda 51 greatest hits collection. Right. It's really derivative, and I have to say that because it really is. Uncharitable people might say that Suda is starting to repeat. Play and the upgrade structure are both straight out of Shadows of the Damned, and the humour is very puerile, but it's quite scarce. So it made me think of Lollipop Chainsaw. Okay. So it's a meshing of all of Suda's back catalogue almost. It's too derivative to be himself, and you have to hold your hands up and say, yeah, he probably is. The combat is very, very easy to compare with the sword fighting in No More Heroes. I mean, Mondo Zappa's combat stance is exactly the same as Travis Touchdown, and just the pace of the combat is very similar. Visually, obviously, it looks like Killer 7. The gun... Yeah? Okay, my number one then is Killer is Dead on the Xbox 360, also available on the PlayStation 3. It's the new game from Suda 51. Have you played it yet?
No, but you've had it for a while, haven't you?
I have. I played it. I finished it.